As the 1770s began, the Parliament of Great Britain and the colonial assemblies in North America had been at odds for the past several years over the issue of taxation. A new chief minister would now seek to maintain the supremacy of Parliament whilst healing the divide. His title was Lord North. Frederick North was born in Piccadilly on April 13, 1732, son of Lucy and Francis North, Baron Guilford. He was educated at Eton and enrolled in Trinity College, Oxford on October 12, 1749. He received a Master of Arts on March 21, 1750, and became Lord North 2 years later. By 1754, he was representing Banbury, Oxfordshire, in the House of Commons. On May 20th, 1756, he married Anne Speck, with whom he would have 4 sons and 3 daughters. 3 years later, he was made a Lord of the Treasury at the recommendation of First Lord of the Treasury Thomas Pelham Holles, Duke of Newcastle. With the dismissal of First Lord of the Treasury George Grenville in July 1765, North resigned from the Treasury. The following year, he both opposed and supported the legislative agenda of First Lord of the Treasury Charles Watson Wentworth, Marquis of Rockingham. North voted against repealing the Stamp Act, a move he considered dangerous. At the same time, he voted for the Declaratory Act, which stated that Parliament could make laws for the colonies, quote, in all cases whatsoever. In late 1767, North succeeded Charles Townshend as Chancellor of the Exchequer. At the beginning of May 1769, it was decided that the Townshend Revenue Act would be repealed. The cabinet voted 5-4 to retain the tax on tea, North voting with the majority. On May 16th, the House of Burgesses resolved that only they could tax the denizens of Virginia. Governor Norborne Barclay, Baron de Botetourt, responded by dissolving the assembly the following day. On May 18th, former Burgesses gathered at the Raleigh Tavern and signed an association drafted by George Mason, which listed British goods that the signers would not import until the Townshend Revenue Act was repealed. Unbeknownst to them, the decision had already been made across the Atlantic. On January 28, 1770, North became First Lord of the Treasury. In the Commons on March 5th, North explained that associations like the one formed in Virginia 10 months earlier were failing. This was because colonial importers knew what was coming and prepared by stocking up on British goods, which they could not manufacture. Regardless, he moved that the taxes on glass, lead, paint, and paper be repealed. The tea tax, he argued, should be retained for 3 reasons. Tea was not grown in Great Britain, 3 pennies per pound was light, and it would serve as an indication that Parliament could tax British colonies. In the Commons on March 18, 1774, North introduced the Boston Port Bill to close it until the city's residents paid the East India Company for the tea they had destroyed 3 months earlier. 10 days later, North claimed that the problem in Massachusetts was that the laws were enforced by the same posse comitatus who had rioted. There was something radically wrong in that constitution, he said, in which no magistrate for such a number of years has ever done his duty in such a manner as to force obedience to the laws. He proposed, quote, to take executive power from the hands of the democratic part of the government. To this end, he introduced the Massachusetts Government Bill on April 15th. On February 20th, 1775, North proposed a resolution which he hoped would reconcile Britain and its colonies. If the colonies were to raise money for their defense and administration on their own accord, Parliament would not levy taxes on them. At the beginning of June, Virginia Governor John Murray, Earl of Dunmore, convened the General Assembly to consider North's offer. The Burgesses rejected it, as British troops would continue to be stationed in the colonies, and North did not propose to repeal the Coercive Acts. At the beginning of 1778, the war would soon enter its 3rd year, and the United States were poised to form an alliance with France. North suggested repealing the tea tax and the Massachusetts Government Act, and asked to resign. King George III urged him not to resign. On February 17th, North introduced 2 bills in the Commons. The first stated that Parliament would never again tax America to raise revenue. The other was for the appointment of a peace commission. The Continental Congress proved unwilling to meet the commission until the British acknowledged their independence and withdrew their army and fleet. In late 1781, North received news of the surrender at Yorktown, at which point he said, "Oh God, it is all over." On March 15, 1782, a motion to withdraw the confidence in his ministry was defeated by only 9 votes. 5 days later, North announced his resignation. Upon receiving North's letter, King George said, quote, "Remember, my lord, that it is you who desert me, not I you." On February 17, 1783, 5 years to the day after he had introduced his last conciliatory attempt, North now criticized the preliminary Articles of Peace. He pointed out that the territorial claim ceded to the United States was so vast it included 24 indigenous nations. The Americans would have fishing rights off Newfoundland and in the Gulf of St. Lawrence, while the British would not be permitted to fish off the coast of the United States. And the promised free navigation of the Mississippi River was impossible while the United States controlled the east bank, and Spain controlled both its west bank and its mouth. Most grievous of all to North was that the Continental Congress would recommend that the state legislatures provide compensation to loyalists. He felt this article consigned the loyalists to poverty, as the members of these legislatures harbored resentment toward them. During North's speech, a dog entered the House of Commons and began barking. When order was restored, North said to Speaker of the House of Commons, quote, "Sir, I was interrupted by a new speaker, but as his argument is concluded, I will resume mine." King George repeatedly pushed North to resume being First Lord of the Treasury, but North steadfastly refused. Finally, on April 2nd, he became Secretary of State for the Home Department. He was dismissed with the rest of the ministry near the end of 1783. By 1787, North had become blind. Upon his father's death on August 4th, 1790, he became 2nd Earl of Guildford and took his seat in the House of Lords on November 25th. He died of dropsy at his home on Grosvenor Square on August 5th, 1792, and was buried in his family's vault at All Saints' Church in Roxton, Oxfordshire. When North came to power, tensions were already rising between Parliament and the colonial assemblies over who possessed the power of taxation. His effort to restore order in Massachusetts heightened the agitation of the colonists. Ultimately, he was willing to relinquish the espoused parliamentary right to tax the colonies if it meant reconciliation with said colonies. But the damage to Anglo-American relations was done. All the British could do was either win the war or acknowledge the independence of the United States. If you like our videos, please like, subscribe, and comment below.